We're back, Bible boys. Back with the Genesis.
Bible 3.
Bible part 3.
Yeah, Bible part 3. How you doing, Phil? I haven't seen you in a little while.
I'm doing good. I've got some, through mysterious circumstances, I have acquired some very smelly, slightly expensive cheese.
Yeah.
That we are going to enjoy with some wine today.
He's sliced them up on a big. He's sliced a whole piece of cheese into small pieces, like if you ask the child to do a task and they end up like completely overdoing it. We have like this just very cutely laid like kind of board of cheese in front of us.
It's called a cheese platter, and it's ancient history. It's just almost as ancient as these stories that we're going to discuss today.
It's a cheese platter with one kind of cheese on it.
There's two kinds of cheeses. The other one isn't sliced yet.
So, what are we doing today, Phil?
Yes, let's put the cheese aside and be brothers for a second here.
Yeah.
And
the cheese covenant.
Yes, the cheese covenant. And he was covered in cheese. Anyway. We're going back to Genesis. I think we left off at Genesis 19, 20-ish.
Yeah, we had a good conversation about the incest story of the Bible.
Yeah, a lot. The old little. I'm not even gonna say it.
Yeah, tune into the last episode if you don't know anything about that. Yeah, so we're going from chapter 20, and we're gonna try and get to. We're going to get to the chapter 37, I think, today. It's 20 to 37. And then we'll probably save one. We'll save one last episode for the final 13 chapters. So, as we mentioned, where we finished off was the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, where like God destroys Sodom and this whole town, this whole city, which was like built on sin and this corrupt place, was destroyed by God. And Lot, who was like some guy who was visited by angels, he was kind of given favorable treatment and like given a way out and told by God that like by the angels that you can escape. And when they're escaping, they're told not to look back. And like not to look back at the place being destroyed. But as they do that, Lot's wife disobeys that order and she looks back and she gets turned into a pillar of salt. So Lot and his two daughters are the only surviving people from this, or we assume the only surviving people from this, and they go into a cave, and then the daughters, they get him drunk and kind of do some bad stuff to him. And... But then we
emphasis on they do it to him.
Yeah, it's kind of. I mean, this isn't part of the story today, but it's kind of like rough that like the only time that female characters have any agency in the Genesis is when they're raping their own dad.
Well,
it's pretty intense. Anyway,
yeah. So. We're going back to Abraham, right?
Yeah.
So, Abraham, he's moving on. He's going somewhere else. And to the land of Gerar, I think?
Yeah.
And there is this very powerful guy called Abimelech, the king of Gerar. And Abraham pulls the same shit that he already pulled once before, where he's like, this woman, Sarah... She is my sister.
She's not my wife.
Yes.
She's my sister.
Yeah. And so, yeah.
The amount of times this comes up in Genesis, like this must have happened like every day back in the olden days.
So anyway, Abimelech, he gets this vision from God. God telling him like, don't lust for her because she's a man's wife. And he was like, well, I didn't touch her, so let me just, like, be nice to these people.
Yeah.
And so he gives a bunch of stuff to Abraham, and they, like, have a little luxurious life there.
Yeah. And I think we talked about this in the previous podcast, but the relationship between Abraham and his wife. Well, I think they have a good relationship, but Sarah is infertile, or at least I think she's like 90 or something in the book, so she's too old to have kids. But God promised to her that she would be able to give birth at some point, and I think they were visited by angels who said that Abraham was visited by, or they were visited by angels, and they didn't appear as angels, but they appeared as normal people, and he took them in, and those people told him that that his wife would have a child. I think, unless I'm misremembering, but she like laughs it off, and then God's like, "No, but you really will," and she's like, "Oh, I wasn't laughing." But then she eventually has kids. She gives birth to Isaac, and this is like, you know, presented as like God honoring his promises, as he always does in all of these episodes. And he's called Isaac. And at the same time, the servant Hagar, who Sarah kind of gave, I guess, to Abraham to bear children, to bear Ishmael, Hagar and Ishmael are like basically sent off. And it's not really clear whether that's like a good thing, or whether it's like something they wanted, or whether it's like they were forced away.
But the Ishmaelites later become kind of an important clan that reappears.
Yeah.
So there's like one line of the family, kind of a more unpure, less favored by God line going off.
Yeah. The same with the Moabites and stuff. The daughters, the family that were born from Lot's incest.
Yeah.
From Lot's daughters. They're also kind of like considered lower on the pecking order.
So the name Isaac, by the way, apparently means something like laugh, right?
Yes.
Because
yeah.
Sarah was so like, at first she laughed at God when he promised them that they would have children, because she was like, I'm too old, ha ha ha.
Yeah.
And then when she had him, she was so happy that she laughed. So. Little side note there. Okay.
By the way, we have wine, so we should cheers.
Yeah, let's cheers over this wine. There you go. Not bad.
It'll do. It's good.
Let's sample the cheese.
Yeah, let's get some cheese going. Oh, that's a big piece. That's really good.
That's good cheese.
Well sliced as well, I have to say.
Thank you very much. I followed the ancient teachings of the samurai in slicing the cheese.
You can tell. So, what happens? Isaac is born. What is the first thing that God does after Isaac's born?
Kill him.
So,
not exactly, but yeah.
But basically, this child that like Abraham and Sarah have been longing for years is finally born because of God's, you know, intervention and like God's promise.
Yeah.
And then when Isaac finally is born, then he's like, you should kill that thing.
Well, he commands Abram to go make him a sacrifice.
Yeah.
But what exactly was the rundown here? Abraham was going to use something else. And then...
Was it a donkey?
Yeah, I think it might have been a donkey. But... yeah, God is not happy with that. It's like, you have to sacrifice your son. And, well... in last moment, God's like, you know, pretty much everyone knows the story, but, you know, it's like, wait, I forgot.
I can read it.
Okay, what's the exact,
So, when they came to the place of which God had told them, Abraham built the altar there and laid the wood in order, and bound Isaac his son, and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Then Abraham reached out his hand and took the knife to slaughter his son. But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, Here I am. He said, Do not lay your hand on the boy or do anything to him, for now I know that you fear God, seeing you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. So Abraham called the name of that place, The Lord Will Provide. And the original name of the place, hang on a sec, is...
What is it?
I don't know.
Good job. Yeah, I forgot what the Hebrew is, but...
It's not Moab, is it?
This is a disaster.
Well, it doesn't matter.
Too much cheese.
But the name that's given to the mountain translates to the Lord will provide. And it is apparently said to this day, on the mount of the Lord it shall be provided.
Jehovah Jireh.
Oh, okay. Is that Yahweh?
No.
Oh, Yahweh.
Yahweh will see.
Mm.
Suggests the interpretation Yahweh will provide, a meaning which, according to RV, whoever that is also given by the later part of this verse.
Yeah. Cool.
Okay, so let's talk about that for a second. This whole thing, like, obviously from the Isaac perspective, it's kind of like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Because how do you trust your dad after that?
Mm.
From the Abram perspective, it's like, was this good or bad? And do we think that Abram may have anticipated God intervening at the last second? But wouldn't that also undermine the sacrifice?
Yeah.
Thoughts?
Well, it is like having trust and like having trust in someone and anticipating what they do are like different things. But in this situation, yeah, maybe they are kind of similar because like we know that God promised, and so far, you know, he's lived up to all his promises, and
yeah,
Abraham is like, you know, God's favorite little guy, and he also promises that, you know, Isaac will he will carry the family line, or rather, he promises to Abraham that his son will be like the father of like great nations or whatever. I think it's Isaac that he's talking about at that point. And so, I mean, obviously, if that's true, then you would have no doubt that something would, you know, prevent that from happening. So I don't know. It's kind of like if you trusted in God, then you wouldn't have any doubt. But you would also kind of, if you didn't fulfill that, you'd be like, "What the fuck, man?" It's like you said Isaac would be the father of great nations. Why isn't that happening? I've just killed my son.
Now, if we transpose this to a more abstract interpretation, what could this mean? Because obviously, you know, I don't think this is trying to inspire us to sacrifice our children to God or anything like that.
Yeah, of course.
There is I forgot where this idea came from, but there is an idea that prayer is, you know, they used to do animal sacrifices or human sacrifices, and eventually the big thing about the like Judeo-Christian religions is that prayer became a stead for sacrifice. The idea is that you sacrifice, you know, valuable time of your, like, you just, you know, you sit and do something that is like more or less meaningless, right? You're not really doing anything productive for your like immediate economic circumstance, right?
Right, okay.
So that is your sacrifice. Or like you chant some phrase over and over, right?
Yeah.
Instead of killing some animal, which is, it's going to negatively affect your ability to survive, right?
Yeah. I'm just going to write notes as you speak.
Fair enough. So, yeah, the ultimate sacrifice, right? More so than your own life, I guess, is to kill your son. Is this... So, do we get from this a benevolent reading of God or a cruel reading of God?
What do you mean by benevolent?
Like, is this like, oh, God is so nice that he spared Isaac?
Yeah.
But, or is it more like, why would he do something horrible like this in the first place?
I mean, the way how I read a lot of this like second section of Genesis was like,
yeah,
unlike the other stories, which kind of flip back and forth between characters that don't have much, there's not really much continuity between the stories between these different characters. As in, it's not. There's no like narrative like connection between them. This is literally like a family lineage being traced, and it's like, there's whole sections where the connection between these characters is described. Yeah. And the relationship with God is the thing that connects them all. And oh god, it's a big slice of cheese.
I'm slicing the cheese as we speak.
So I think like God's, from what I understand, that these stories are supposed to kind of like layer on top of one another to try and further emphasize this idea that you should trust in God. And
like the whole covenant thing, like God will fulfill his promise.
Exactly, yeah.
So yeah, in a way this is like ultimate faith, right? To have faith, to have trust in God.
And all the characters who when characters kind of, it's often kind of criticized, or rather, there are often kind of negative consequences for the characters that take things into their own hands and, deny the will of God, if to put it in another way, right? Like, when Lot's daughters rape Lot, like, that's them. I suppose they don't have a relationship with God, so it's kind of different, but like, that's them taking this situation into their own hands.
Right, and then they become some off-brand, like, unimportant clan.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And the people who are closest with God are the people who blindly believe in him, which is obviously, like, very problematic.
Yes. And things kind of change a little bit with Jacob.
Yeah. Jacob, but this is the interesting thing as well, because like, what you kind of get like as things go along is this like, I don't know, it's almost like a familial sort of intimacy with God, where there's some back and forth, and that happens with Abraham as well, with Sodom and Gomorrah, where he's like, if you destroy this whole place, it's suppose there are 50 good people, or whatever the whole thing is.
Right, he negotiates.
He negotiates with God, and it's like, you don't do that, right? So it's kind of like currying favor, and then getting to a position when you can negotiate, and then further on, like Jacob, or is it Joseph? No, Jacob wrestles with God, and there are these different kind of like interactions, like God as. But it's not like really clear that it's like a fluid transition between God as this distant thing, and then God as this like close thing to which you can negotiate. It's not like it goes clearly from one state to the other. It kind of flits between like closeness and distance. Because I think Joseph's story is pretty. It's not. It seems like God is almost completely in control of the whole Egypt arc.
So, if we do the thing that we always do and switch God's place with just nature,
Mm.
what would it mean to challenge nature, or to, because the following God, having faith in God reading would be some bad things just are, you can't change them, so you should accept them and look forward.
Mm.
Right? What would it mean to challenge nature? Like, say there is some circumstance for some other reason than God, like you have to kill your son, whatever it may be. Why? What would it mean to challenge that?
I mean, like, I guess if we're talking about like health, medicine, we can talk about medicine as like a an affront to the the affront to the wishes of God, which I think it is sometimes referred to. And I guess people talk about like unnaturally prolonging people's lives, like if people are in states where they are on like life support, for example, organ transplants, stuff like that.
Yeah, that would be,
because that's controversial, right?
Yeah, that would be challenging God, right?
Yeah.
Cloning.
Yeah. IVF, stuff like that. You know what IVF is?
No.
Like when you, what is it called? Test tube baby thing. I think that's what it is. Like a baby is fertilized in a test tube and then put in a baby.
What's it short for?
I don't know.
I knew you'd say that.
Intravenous. Something. I don't know. But that's also, I mean, would be like an affront, I guess, right? It would be considered an affront.
Okay, moving on.
I think maybe it's also just worth mentioning that the idea of like this affront to nature, when we talk about, destroying nature, for example, or doing things that are unnatural, I often doubt that there is really like a real unnatural thing. As in, try and find something that's actually truly unnatural,
right?
That doesn't have a connection with the natural world in some way.
Because humans are natural, right?
Yeah.
So anything that's quote unquote artificial is also natural, right?
Yes. Yeah. And it's kind of a different conversation, but so we have the testing of Isaac, and when Isaac's tested, when Abraham's tested, God says to him that he basically blesses Isaac and the rest of his offspring. And what does he say? He says, and the angel of the Lord called to Abraham a second time from heaven and said, "By myself I have sworn, declares the Lord, because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your only son. I will surely bless you, and I will surely multiply your offspring as the stars of heaven and as the sand that is on the seashore. And your offspring shall possess the gate of his enemies. And in your offspring shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because you have obeyed my voice." It's hard to speak because I have my mouth is watering from the cheese. But we have like a reference to earlier as well, the stars of the heaven.
And interestingly enough, he says, "Your only son." Well, of course, Isaac is not Abraham's only son. He's simply his only son from Sarah.
Right.
But there is some implication here that the love or the relationship between Sarah and Abraham is, much more significant than Abraham and Hagar, the maid.
Yeah.
So, I mean, on the one hand, God allows for those kind of, multiple wife situations. On the other hand, there's a clear statement here that, one is better than the other.
Yeah.
Which is also, Hagar gets sent away and everything, right? So.
Yeah, and there are all the different terms. It's like you have the wife, and then you have the servant, and then you have the concubine.
Yeah.
And then you have, I don't know, your daughters. No.
Pizza Hut delivery girl.
It's so funny. The book is... There's just so much sex in this book, man.
Yeah.
Pretty much all about it. So then, eventually, Sarah, she's quite old, so she passes away.
Yeah, they bury her in a cave.
Yeah, which is sold by the Hittites, and this is also where people in the future of that family are buried. And at this point, I think their family is like they have quite like high renown because of their. Oh god, I'm destroying that cheese.
I'm cutting the cheese and it's falling into.
It's like
a billion pieces.
It's like white, purple, and green spots.
Yeah, you should try it. You should try this cheese. It's not as good.
No, I'm gonna try to buy it. I don't mind it.
Yeah, it's not bad, but
I do like a sharp blue cheese.
Bible and cheese, everyone. Okay. So the next thing that's really of significance, I think, is first of all, Abram gets a new wife.
Yep.
It's like Sarah's dead, so Abram gets a new wife.
Yeah. This is Rebecca. Rebecca.
It's not Rebecca.
It's not?
It's Keturah. It's Abraham's new wife. She's not really important.
Oh, we're talking about Isaac.
Abraham.
Right. Okay.
Yeah,
sorry.
and they fuck and whatever. Anyway, so next thing that happened that is important is Abram sends a servant to what is his name? Lamech? Laban, whatever. Who's Lamech? I forgot. He sends a servant to Laban and is like, okay, you find a wife for Isaac.
And he's like, Abe's like, those Canaanite girls, you don't want one of those. We want one of these girls from Laban's place. So the servant goes and he says that he's guided by God, and he's given this vision of like he'll be approached by a girl who will offer him water from her jug. From a jug. And then after he takes the drink, she will offer to give water to the camel. And if you haven't already guessed it, that's what happens. Rebecca approaches him, the servant, offers him some water, and when he takes it, she also offers it to the camel. So immediately he's like, shit, it's the girl. And then he gives her this like jewelry, and then they go and visit Laban, Rebecca's brother, and Laban gets the servant to stay. And the servant explains the vision, and that Isaac wants a wife. And Laban agrees to it, and so then Isaac and Rebecca, they end up marrying.
Yeah, they marry and they lay together. And then the next sentence is like, and Isaac is comforted by Rebecca after Sarah's death.
Yeah.
That's some Prince Harry, my dick is oscillating shit. Like,
oh shit, no, that's so true. Yeah, it's like he was. Yeah, it says, then Isaac brought her into the tent of Sarah, his mother, and took Rebecca, and she became his wife, and he loved her. So Isaac was comforted after his mother's death.
I was like, ooh.
Some Freudian shit.
That's, yeah. Anyway.
Prince Harry reference is too good.
Okay. So, we have this idea of two nations in Rebecca's womb struggling. One of them is
Esau.
Yeah, to the two sons. And
Esau and Jacob.
I have a footnote here on my commented version that is of significance. Let me find it.
You should also mention that Abe is dead now. Abraham.
Yes. Where is it?
So, Isaac and Rebecca, they have a child. They have two children, Esau and Jacob. And I think it's described by God, or maybe an angel, that they will become two warring nations. This is like the prophecy. So these two twins, Esau and Jacob, are warring nations. And in the womb, they're also fighting.
Yeah, and the footnote in my book on that says...
the elder shall serve the younger. So in this line, popular tradition preserves the recollection of a time where Esau, the elder, was superior to Jacob. Esau was a settled, organized monarchy, whilst Jacob... Oh, these are the names of the nations. So Edom is for Esau and Israel is for Jacob. So Edom was a settled, organized monarchy, whilst Israel was still a loose group of nomad tribes. But David conquered Edom, and then the elder served the younger. So Edom served Israel. This dependence of Edom on Israel or Judah continued with intervals perhaps as late as the reign of Uzziah. This short poem may have originated in the exaltation of the Israelites at David's conquest. You got me to read that.
Yes. Thank you.
Like, what is this?
There's some... We always have to remember that these people in these stories, they're also the names of tribes.
Right, yeah.
So there's, there's a big question here. How much of this is like, a story, and how much of this is, the story of tribes warring and supplanting each other, right? Mm-hmm. Like, were there really two children, like Jacob and Edom? Or is it, were these two tribes that were fighting each other, right?
Yeah, sure.
Good stuff.
Anyway. So we have quite a visual moment where the birth is described, and Esau comes out and he's like red and furry, and Jacob comes out second, holding on to Esau's heel.
Yeah.
And I think this is obviously the significance here is like the firstborn is the oldest, and the firstborn will inherit and will have to will be served by the younger brothers or the younger family members. But maybe it kind of is an indication of their characters, the fact that Jacob is grabbing Esau's heel. He's trying to hold on or trying to pull him down. And this is also confirmed by God when he says that the older son, Esau, will serve the younger son, Jacob. And this is how things play out.
Yeah, so apparently in ancient Hebrew, the word Aqeb, Aqeb, means heel, which later became Jacob.
Mm.
And so the name is explained as supplanter.
Mm.
Yeah.
So, and this is kind of how things play out. And then we have this kind of family drama.
Yeah, so Jacob has to be one of the worst assholes in Genesis.
He's pretty bad.
Like, he's such a dick.
So we have this interesting dynamic where, so Isaac the father loved Esau. Esau is this like powerful, charismatic outdoorsman guy who goes out hunting and shit. And on the other hand, we have Rebecca, the mother, who loves Jacob more. And Jacob is this guy who spends his time indoors. And he's much more conniving. It kind of like seems to represent like the physical power versus like mental power.
Mm.
Jacob is conniving. Esau kind of over relies on his physical ability. And what happens is Esau, Jacob basically tricks Esau into selling his birthright for a bowl of stew.
Yeah, so Esau is literally starving. He's fainting. He's like on the verge of death, and his brother Jacob comes along and is like, "Oh, you hungry?"
Well, I don't think he's really in the face of death. He's just been working and he's tired.
It says like he's about to faint or something.
I think he was over exaggerating when he said that though, because it says that he was he comes in from the field and he was exhausted, And he says, "Let me eat that red stew, for I am exhausted."
Oh, in my version it says like he's about to faint.
It says here, Esau says, "I'm about to die. Of what use is the birthright to me?" Maybe he is, but I think it's
anyway. It's like a moment of weakness, and Jacob, his fucking brother, instead of like, yeah, let me give you some of the food that you hunted. He's like, well, I got this food. How about you sell it to me for your birthright? Or you can die.
I think it might... it says in my book it's bread and lentil stew. It's not clear that it has meat in it.
Okay, fair enough.
And Jacob, he's like a cook guy. We just love cooking. But I mean, either way, yeah, it's weirdly deceitful. Why do you think? Like, what do you think is motivating Jacob?
But he wants to be the man. He wants to be top dog, right?
But God has already said that Jacob will be served by Esau, right?
Oh, yes?
So this happened when they were born. God says that the older will serve the younger. I mean, it's written in
right.
Notes,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Maybe they don't know it explicitly, but I mean, assuming that they do, like, what would motivate that is not. I don't really know. And in a way, like, it kind of, again, we're talking about this, like, acting in place of God, or acting when God would have done things for you, acting without trusting.
Yeah,
is like another. Is quite, I think, essential to this part of Genesis. But it doesn't seem to really lead to anything bad for Jacob.
No, and it doesn't reflect really good on his character as a reader, at least.
No.
So, but this is not the first time that Jacob fucks over Edom, right? Or it's not the last time, sorry. It is the first time, but...
Esau.
Yeah.
No, this is the first time. So, the real significant thing happens when Jacob convinces his father to bless him over his brother Esau.
Yeah, but that's a bit later, so we have...
It is later, yeah.
We have a famine now.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is that Isaac gets told by God to go to Egypt to get some food. Or dwell there or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And now Isaac, motherfucker, goes to Egypt and he pulls the wife-sister shit again, doesn't he?
Yeah, he literally does, yeah. He goes to Gerar, I think, again. He settles in Gerar, and he goes to... I think this is...
he does go not to Egypt, right, okay.
He settles... Yeah, the famine is in Egypt, I think. So he goes to Gerar, and there's another Abimelech. Apparently this Abimelech is different. Or it's not clear that it's the same one. The time difference is too big. And the same thing happens. Yeah, like you said. He says Rebecca is his sister. And then Abimelech finds out, and he says anyone who touches Isaac and Rebecca will be put to death. And then, but they're allowed to stay there, and God is like particularly favorable to them. They have like an amazing crop and become very, very wealthy, and people begin to envy them as well.
So, I was thinking about this. Third time this happens, right? She's my sister, even though she's his wife. And then, things happen. First time it was the Pharaoh who gets tricked. And the Pharaoh, I forgot whose wife it was at the time, but he fucks her basically. And then he's punished. Second time, Abimelech, he refrains, and instead he gives them stuff. This time again, he is then, rewarded by God. What does this mean?
I don't know.
It's like, okay, here, like, are they like testing different nations on their like morals about, like, do these? I don't know. What the fuck's going on?
So the difference between this case and the case just before is that God doesn't intervene explicitly. So in the time before that we talked about today, God visits Abimelech, and it's told that Abraham's wife Sarah is not his sister and is his actual wife, and then that's what prompts Abimelech to give them land and stuff. But in this situation, Abimelech witnesses Isaac.
Yeah, okay.
It witnesses Isaac like being intimate with his wife, or like kissing his wife or some shit. So he's like, she's your wife, not your sister, what are you doing? And then he kind of gets the idea, like he gets what's happening, and he does the same thing. Anyone who touches them is going to be killed.
And then it says that Isaac decides they're going to settle there. So in a way, it's almost like a test, right? It's like, is this a safe place to be? I don't know. It's a very weird thing to occur 3 times.
Yeah, it is really strange that it comes up so much. Especially, it doesn't, like... And, well, it always ends in the same way as well, pretty much, right? Like, it's... no one dies. No one actually is properly punished for what happens.
But also, from the male perspective, it's really selfish. Because it's like... The reasoning is that if you put your wife as your sister, then maybe someone else will fuck her, but at least they won't kill you, right? Because they're scared that if they find out they're married, someone might kill the husband. So it's kind of a really like beta move to be from the dude, right?
I guess so.
It's like, well, I don't want to get hurt, so you can fuck my wife. I don't mind as long as there's no risk of me getting hurt.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, maybe they agreed on it. Like, but again, I mean, it's like, what would you rather do? Would you rather be killed or have someone fuck your wife?
Killed.
Really?
Probably. Yeah.
Jesus.
But we'll put up a fight at least. I don't know. It's not like there's two like.
No. There is.
He doesn't even want to consider the possibility of him getting antagonized, right?
I guess so. Yeah.
We want to stay out of trouble, so you just bend over.
Yeah, it is kind of like a lot of the things in this book is kind of like just taken for granted that that's the thing that you would do.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, oh, you haven't got any money? Well, obviously you're going to sell yourself into slavery, right? Yeah, it's kind of annoying, that one. It's tricky. Anyway, we should move on.
Yes.
So...
Jacob wants Rachel. Are we there yet?
Rachel?
I think I skipped ahead of it.
I think you have, yeah. So, well, they get kicked out because they have so much wealth. They move around loads. Abimelech visits Isaac. They agree to a covenant to not like harm or interfere with each other. Because Abimelech can see that Isaac is, being followed by God. Then we have Isaac's blessing of Jacob, and this is one of the like quite key scenes of the book. Jacob pretends to be Esau, which is their father Isaac's favorite son, and he like dresses up like Esau. He puts like fur on his hands to mimic Esau's furry body. He like takes his clothes to make him smell like Esau.
Because Isaac went blind, I think.
Yes.
So,
Isaac had gone blind basically by that point.
Yeah. So Isaac's like, "Who are you? Your voice is like Jacob.
Yeah.
But your furry hands are like Esau."
And this is all also kind of directed by Rebecca as well, who is close with Jacob. And again, you know, these people they know that God has said that Jacob will be the heir, Jacob will be the ruler. Yet they're still trying to intervene and make things happen quicker, and you know, things may have happened naturally without this interference and without so much chaos and like
perhaps. But anyway, yeah, so Jacob tricks his father into giving him his blessing, which basically means that he is now ruler over all the other people in the clan, and he gets all the shit, like all the property are belong to us. All your base are belong to us, right?
Yeah, I got the reference.
So funny. And then Edom, Esau, whatever, he has two names apparently, comes to his father and is like, "So, I have come to get my blessing." And his dad's like, "Wait a minute. If you don't have it."
"Father, I have come for my blessing." So Esau's like begging for a blessing, but all Isaac can do is basically say that, like, you need to go far away, and you're going to be toiling for ages.
Yeah, you're going to be a slave to your brother, and you shall live by the sword. Yeah. Which means, realistically, to plunder and kill people for their stuff.
Yeah. So, Jacob is then sent to his uncle Laban by Isaac. Laban is Rebecca's brother, and Esau is married to one of Ishmael's daughter. But the important story here is Jacob in Laban. What happens is he goes there and he meets Rachel, which is Laban's daughter.
She's so hot. Oh my god.
She's like absolutely she's like banging. And Laban embraces Jacob. He takes him in, and Jacob's like, "I want to marry this girl. I want to marry Rachel." So Laban, they basically come up with an agreement that Jacob can marry Rachel if he works for him for 7 years on his farm. So Jacob, he puts in the hours and he works for 7 years, and after that 7 years, you know, Laban is like, "Okay, I'll give you my daughter Leah," who's the
so
this is what happens, huh?
Yes, but no. So this is how we come back to Jacob being like the hugest fucking asshole on the planet, right? So Jacob marries.
Oh no.
Some cheese fell down. That's fine. Jacob marries. Then he fucks her on the wedding night. And then the next morning, he realizes that it's Leah, not Rachel.
Yeah.
It's like, dude, how? How does this happen? This banging girl that you were so in love with, and the other one is so ugly you don't want her, and married her, fucked her, next morning, wait a minute.
This is the wrong girl. It's like, where's Rachel here?
Oh my god. And then Laban, whatever, he's like, "Oh, well, you know, we have to marry the oldest one first." So after a week passes, and then after a week of marriage celebration, he also marries Rachel.
Yes. But he does it on the agreement that he'll work another 7 years.
Yeah.
So Laban is like a crafty little boy, and he's just bleeding this guy dry. It's really ambiguous, like morally ambiguous, this whole section, because they both kind of fuck each other over in their own ways.
Yeah, so even though even though Jacob is the Hebrew in this scenario, Laban, and you can finish the sentence.
I don't know. I don't get it.
Moving on.
Okay. So another element of this is that Leah can have children, but Rachel can't, and I think that's like decided by God. Rachel gets very jealous about this because Leah's like popping loads of kids out. She's having mad babies, and at some point, Rachel's like, if I can't have kids, I'll die. And I think this is interesting because the dynamic between these two is like useful.
So Jacob loves Rachel more, but Leah is the one who gets children from God. So God intervened and is like, okay, so Leah is less loved than Rachel, so I'll make it so that only Leah can have children. Which is a weird intervention.
But it gets to the point where, like, Leah is devoted, I think, and she, you know, where obviously she's in a favorable situation, but like Rachel is jealous, and she's trying to do whatever she can to have kids, but at some point Leah like asks God for Rachel to become fertile, and I think through that she becomes like God grants it. So she's kind of like, you know, I guess in this situation, I guess the thing to learn from this maybe is that if you happen to be in a favorable situation over someone else, you should also hope that people can come to that same situation as you as well. People can arrive at that same like fruitful position where you're like, if I can have kids, I want you to also have kids. Like, I don't want to be
but that's not what any of them think here, right?
I think that's what because Leah asks God to make Rachel fertile.
No.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Pretty sure she does. Well, what was your reading?
Well, so Leah gets all these kids, and then she's like boasting about it to Rachel. He's like, haha, fuck you, I have children. And then Rachel is jealous, so she makes her servant fuck Jacob. So then so the servant makes a child with Jacob, and then Rachel pretends it's like her own child.
Yeah.
And then she like is like, haha, I have a child now. And then Leah again is angry, and then she makes her servant also fuck Jacob. And then he's like, oh, I have more children than you though. And then eventually, after quite a while, Rachel finally has a child, which is Joseph. But not on behalf of anyone's intervention, I think. Right?
I don't know.
Where is this passage where Leah?
I don't know, but I also can't see any passages where she's like, you know, putting Rachel down.
Because all the names of Leah's children, they all mean something. So, wait, so there's Dan. This is too early though. Wait, what's the first child of Leah?
I don't know.
Reuben, right? No.
Reuben, yeah.
Yeah. So, Leah says, God hath looked upon my affliction and given me a child. So Reuben, Raubeoni, in Hebrew, whatever, means, like, my husband will love me. That's what it means, Reuben. And then the next child that Leah gets is Simeon.
Yep.
Which suggests the Hebrew verb shama, which means hear, like God has heard my pledge.
Right.
And then the next child is Levi, which suggests the Hebrew verb lava, which means joined. Hence the etymology, now will my husband be joined unto me, which Leah said. And then the next child is Judah. No, sorry. Okay, so then that's the first three children of Leah. Then it says, when Rachel saw that she bare Jacob no children, Rachel envied her sister, and she said unto Jacob, give me children, or else I die, and so on. And then she gave him Bilhah, her handmaid, to wife. And then Jacob and Bilhah, the handmaid of Rachel, had a child called Dan.
There's two actually.
Dan first.
Yeah, and then Naphtali.
Yeah, so Dan means he judged. In Hebrew, it's a verb. So like God hath judged me. And Naphtali means the Hebrew verb wrestle.
As in, wrestling with his sister and prevailing.
Yes.
Then Leah sees that Leah stops having children. Then she gives her servant Zilpah, and has Zilpah has a child with Jacob
called Asher, right?
Gad says good fortune has come.
Yeah.
And then there's a second one called Asher.
And Asher means to call happy.
Call someone happy.
Yeah, Leah said, happy am I, for the daughters will call me happy.
Yeah. Then Rachel said to Leah, please give me some of your son's mandrakes. But she said to her, is it a small matter that you have taken away my husband? Would you take away my son's mandrakes also?
So they hate each other, the sisters.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then eventually it says, and God remembered Rachel, and God hearkened to her and opened her womb, and she conceived and bore a son. So Rachel having a child eventually. This is Joseph. I mean, Rachel having Joseph. I don't think is related to Leah or anything. Right? So God remembered her. What?
Okay, fair enough. All right. Let's move on then.
Well, not to dwell on this too long, but what do we learn from this? Like, there's a lot of envy, but God intervenes and it's like, now you have children. Like, what's the point? Why is there this rivalry between the sisters? Why does God take sides? I mean, if we just replace God by nature, it sometimes happens that the person you love with, you literally biologically cannot have children with, right?
Yeah.
It's not a super uncommon thing. So then the question is, what do you do about it? What do they do in the story? They have children with the handmaid. Now, in modern times, this could be adoption. This could be sperm donation, stuff kind of stuff, right?
Like IVF, like we talked about earlier as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm kind of surprised actually that none of these get punished.
Well, that's
for their envy, right?
Yeah, no one really gets punished. Like Jacob doesn't get punished for anything. Laban also doesn't get punished. Whereas before, I mean, Lot's wife, I think, is probably the last person to actually get properly punished. But she gets punished for not obeying what she was told to do.
Right.
Yeah. It's kind of part of... Yeah, I don't know.
So anyway, the final son, Joseph, is the son between Rachel and Jacob. And there is kind of an implicit assumption here that he's the true heir, even though he's the youngest. Somehow, like, he's the only son between actually Rachel and Jacob, right? So yeah, again, there's kind of an implicit statement here that, you know, a child from love is more important than the other children.
A child from your really hot wife.
Yeah. Gotta pass on the good genes.
I don't know. I'm not sure about the love thing, to be honest, because it's, you know, this like conception of love, I feel feels quite distant in like a lot of places in this book. Like, you know, I mean, we've already talked about the amount of times like men have sold out their wives.
Yeah.
When, you know, and they are like the, you know, the quote, like the bloodline, the strong bloodline, right? And there's something to be honest, I kind of more chalk it up to like, it's not necessarily love, but it's like God's decided that these are the people who are the important people in the story, you know, and these are the people that carry the most important bloodline, for not necessarily any other reason than that. And, you know, we can talk about love, but at the end of the day, this guy, he's like fucked 3 other people aside from the person that he apparently properly loves.
Yeah, true. And he didn't even notice.
Yeah, exactly. Like, also, where was Rachel on the honeymoon? Like, was she just like, what was she doing?
Guess he was celebrating.
I guess so. So,
Jacob tricks Laban.
Yes.
Laban wants Jacob to keep working for him.
The sheep story.
Yeah, and Jacob does that for a couple of years. 6 years to be exact.
Yeah.
And after 20 years, he's had enough. Because Laban, he keeps changing his wages. And, you know, the conditions aren't great. Which is also kind of probably because Jacob fucks Laban over. So he does this thing where he's like, I'm going to have all the spotted and the dark sheep, and you're going to have all the clean white sheep. And so if you see any like white sheep among my sheep, you know that something that I betrayed you.
Yeah.
And this is weird, and I don't know what exactly happens, but he uses some branch, leaf, water magic.
Yeah.
He makes the sheep mate in certain conditions with like spotted branches from birch trees, where for some reason there's a bunch of spotted sheep now. And anyway,
I feel like this later inspired some like Minecraft.
Yeah, he basically uses some advanced biological tricks to somehow make it so that Laban ends up with all the genetically weak sheep.
Yeah. And
Jacob has all the good sheep.
Yeah. And
Laban's not happy, obviously.
In the version that I read, there was a commentary that was like God's intervention. That like, you know, by making sheep mate in front of like certain sticks, like certain colored sticks or whatever, you're not actually doing anything necessarily, but it's God that's actually doing that.
Fair enough.
Which could be something to think about. But then again, it's like, why would God assist Jacob in that?
Because he has the blessing.
I guess so, yeah.
Yes, yeah.
I wouldn't mind a bit of blessing.
The chosen people. Anyway, it says Jacob gets very rich and he has many slaves. That's what it says.
Yes!
The chosen people.
And he receives some hostility from his half-brothers, I think.
Yeah.
Because they're also jealous that he has so many slaves.
It's not good.
No.
It's not good out here.
It's rough. So, but anyway, they decide to leave. Jacob decides to leave with all his sheep and his 2 wives, Leah and Rachel.
And again, he tricks Laban. He's like, we're not leaving. And then he leaves.
He does the classic
and
one.
He takes all his stuff and his own stuff.
Yeah.
But Rachel steals the the family idols, which are described as teraphim.
Right.
Teraphim. I looked this up, and they're like little clay figures that kind of look humanoid.
Right.
It's like a religious object at the time that people would pray to. Like, basically the most valuable thing in the house.
Mm.
Rachel steals that from her father, Laban, without him knowing.
Yeah.
And Jacob doesn't know either.
Yeah.
And anyway, Laban is very angry. He catches up to Jacob and Gilead, or what would later be named that.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, I didn't take any of your stuff, Mr. Laban, so you can search my tent, and if you find any of your stuff, you may kill whoever took it.
Mm.
So Rachel hides it under her pillow. She lays down on the pillow, and she's like, I have my period, so I can't get up. Fucking women tricks. Always getting out of PE swimming class in high school.
I mean, that's fair.
Like, oh my god. The boys didn't want to swim either, but we couldn't do that shit. Anyway, so, yeah, she hides the family idols. And Laban doesn't find them. And
Yep.
he's really angry. Laban's like, you took all my daughters and all my sheep, they're all mine, but since God has intervened and told me not to do any do any promises or threats unto you, we're gonna make a contract. And this is interesting.
Mm.
Laban makes a contract with Jacob, and to remind of the contract, they decide to layer up some rocks.
Mm. Yeah, classic move.
Classic move. And nowadays we would sign a form.
Yeah.
Back in the day, they would stack up some rocks.
Stack some rocks and have a little camp out, little barbecue.
And also
bring
interesting.
Bring it back. We must return.
Yeah.
Reject modernity.
Anyway, when they talk about this whole process, they mention their ancestors. The same God that shall honor this contract is also the same God that your father Abram prayed to, or Isaac and his grandfather Abram. So it's interesting how in the idea of making a contract between men, they invoke ancestors, tradition, and God, which we still do today when we swear on the Bible, for example, in court, and things like that, right?
Right.
So it's a very ancient idea, layering rocks, invoking ancestors and God. The means have changed, but we still do the same thing, basically. So anyway, they call this place Gilead or Gilead or whatever, which means something.
Yeah, I'm sure it does. But the content of this covenant is that they will respect each other's boundaries.
Yeah,
like, it's like I think they say something like I won't cross this boundary with the intention of hurting you or taking things from you. And yeah, these kinds of covenants pop up a fair bit in Genesis. So then Jacob returns home. He decides to return back to where Esau is living, and on the way he sends gifts to Esau.
Yeah, because he's scared that his brother is really mad and was going to kill him. Yeah,
so he kind of postures as his servant. He's like, "Oh, we devote ourselves to you. Here are these gifts." And then he hears back a few days, or a little while later, that Esau is coming back to meet Jacob with his army. And so this worries Jacob a lot, and they end up kind of splitting up their caravan, splitting up their group, and sending these gifts on ahead. And then they're camping out on the way, and Jacob is then suddenly wrestling with a guy.
Well,
right?
Okay, so
what's happening here?
Yeah, he sends out these gifts, and then he puts his wife and children somewhere else.
Yeah.
He goes back by himself. And yeah, then there is some man appears and they fight till the morning. And after the mourning, it's decided that from now on Jacob should be called not Jacob but Israel.
Mm.
And I have an interesting footnote on this.
And also, it should be worth mentioning that the man is God.
Right, so will you be so kind to read the super long footnote?
Okay. Jacob's wrestling. Often regarded as compounded from J and E, but perhaps almost wholly J. CF. What does CF mean?
It's like just like a citation thing.
Yeah. But what do I say?
Don't, just read it.
Above and verses. So see above and verses 28-30. But the form and meaning of the original story are uncertain, because probably even the author of the primitive document found in it features which he omitted or altered because they were unsatisfactory. And later, editors may have made further changes. Probably in the original, the man was the deity Elohim or El, worshipped at Peniel. This deity was distinct from Yahweh, that's God, right?
Yeah.
And in the original story, Jacob compelled him to utter his name. It was often a point of magic to compel the spirit who had been conjured up to reveal his name. Jacob also won a blessing by force from this deity, i.e. the sanctuary at Peniel became a place where the Israelites might worship and be blessed. The narrative may be a reminiscence of the conquest of the district by the Israelites, which would involve the subjection of the deity of Peniel by the God of Israel, and the appropriation of the sanctuary to the use of the Israelites. The, quote, halting upon the thigh, end quote, was no doubt a feature of a ritual dance at this sanctuary,
so
the origin of which was explained by a narrative.
So on the thigh, it's mentioned that when they fight, the man, or the god, or whatever, he grabs Jacob by the thigh.
Yeah.
And tries to throw him over.
It's described as the hip socket.
Depending on what translation you use. So the story of the wrestling by night with the unknown supernatural being is one of Rembrandtesque grandeur, whatever that means. Probably, however, the editor who completed the Pentateuch, which is the Old Testament, and inserted the story in its final form, intended the man to be understood as a representative of the God of Israel, and interpreted the wrestling as a symbol of wrestling with God in prayer.
Right, okay.
And the Christian church has always used the narrative in this sense. Then there's another footnote on wrestling the man, saying, in the original story, Jacob alone in the darkness is assaulted by a man, an unearthly being in human form, who seeks to slay him. Later interpretation changed this grim scene to a figure of a knight spent in agonizing prayer. Wrestled. Ye-abek is an etymology of Jabok, man. So, lots of convoluted interpretations, different texts intervening with each other.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting they talk about prayer. Because, when you were talking about prayer earlier, you were describing it as, prayer being this inactive thing, this thing where you're not doing something, at least in an economic sense. You're not dealing with resources, you're not acquiring, you're not bettering your circumstances materially.
Yeah.
But often, when we think about prayer in different religions, as a form of meditation, as a form of reflection, appreciation and stuff like that, it's quite an active thing, a spiritual or emotionally. Why at this point is Jacob wrestling with God?
So it wouldn't make a lot of sense to just wrestle some random guy in this point in the story.
I mean, it literally the way that it comes out is it goes, he took them, this is his family, and sent them across the stream and everything else that he had, and Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until the breaking of the day. It's what?
Exactly.
It's the first mention of the man.
Doesn't make a lot of sense, but if you think of it as prayer, wrestling with God in prayer, it makes a lot of sense, because he's about to potentially face his brother who either wants to kill him or not.
Yeah.
So it would make a lot of sense for him to pray all through the night,
for sure,
to hope for safety for him and his family.
And for it to be something entirely so natural that you could include it in the next sentence.
Yeah.
Just throw it out there without any introduction.
And also the point about wrestling until dawn, or praying until dawn. Another footnote that says, the man, like the spirits and tales of magic, cannot remain after the dawn. The advantage is with Jacob. So this is, we have this in all sorts of ancient mythologies, kind of, even in like kind of heathen, or what is it, the like old Germanic or like northern mythologies, where the idea of a spirit that is bound but can be defeated by making him reveal his name, mentioned earlier. And also, they can only appear during the night.
Right.
So if he wrestles with him and holds him, still until the break of dawn, he wins.
Right. That's interesting.
Okay, and then anyway, he said, I will not let thee go, except thou bless me. And he said unto him, what is thy name? And he said, Jacob. And he said, thy name shall be called no more Jacob, but Israel, for thou hast striven with God and with men, and hast prevailed. So read this footnote on Israel.
Usually explained as God striveth, and sometimes regarded as the battle cry of the nation. This is the word Israel. The other explanation in R.V. Marge, quote, he who striveth with God, quote, is the etymology implied in the latter part of the verse, but is not likely to have been the original meaning of the name. Other explanations are God persists and El's warrior. That's E-L. Another interesting theory is that Israel is a contraction for Ish Rahel, which means the men of Rachel, i.e. the Rachelites or the tribe of Rachel. According to this view, Rachel, as the leading tribe of the Confederation, ultimately gave its name to the whole. The change of name at this point probably corresponds to the enlargement of the Confederation by the addition to the original Jacob of the Aramean tribe of Rachel, and perhaps of other tribes, such as Leah. A name believed to be Israel occurred on a monument of Merenta II, BC 1280, apparently as the name of a people conquered by him in Palestine.
So, 3,300 years ago.
Yeah.
But there's very different interpretations for this name Israel that all make sense. So obviously the whole wrestling with God makes sense. But also the very linguistically, historically oriented idea of, Israel, Israel.
Yeah, that's really cool.
The children of Rachel.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know which one's correct, but
yeah.
Second one makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, no, I was surprised by that. I hadn't come across that before.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. Yeah.
So I guess Ish means man, right? So because we had all those offspring sons like Ishmael and Ishtar and so on.
Right.
Those are all the bastard children.
Yeah.
Right.
Cool. So we have Israel now, and so Esau and Jacob finally meet, and when Esau arrives, he actually embraces Jacob, and there's this nice moment where they have forgive each other essentially, and Jacob insists that Esau accepts gifts and stuff, and kind of continues to push this like, I am you are above me, Esau, respecting Esau. And when I was reading this, like, I was commentary talking about like the spirit of like forgiveness and stuff as being like the lesson here. But and I think there's something to be said about having time between conflict between people with people, as like and that being like a way of healing certain conflicts you have with people. But it's also not really, in my mind, like, it's not, you know, could you forgive Jacob, like, for doing that? Like,
well, another interpretation would be that because Jacob has wrestled with God all through the night, and he is the chosen one, so to speak, that, you know, God made this forgiveness happen.
Right, okay.
Because earlier, you know...
But in that case, there's no lesson here.
No.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, it is kind of weird that they put the super significant thing of Israel right before they meet.
Yeah.
You know.
And you know, you would think, you know, if there were going to be any experience that Jacob would have before meeting Esau, it would be not that I'm scared for my life, so I must appease this man, but more that I should genuinely feel bad for what I did.
Yeah.
Which he doesn't, you know, he's posturing as a servant and he's
There's
giving
no
him his
remorse,
gifts.
yeah.
There's not a sense of remorse. And Esau, he commands it, you know, he embraces Jacob. And by doing that, he's like...
And he gives him back all the gifts.
Well, he insists that he takes them back. But you know, in that sense, Esau kind of commands this whole thing, and it's not really Jacob that does anything. You know,
Esau is kind of the only like good character in this whole book.
He's stupid and good.
Yeah.
You could say that he's you know, I think maybe if we were talking about his sins, his sin would be like being stupid enough to sell his birthright for a bowl of soup.
But then another interesting note is that contrary to what was, you know, the common culture at the time, you know, usually the eldest son is the one who continues the bloodline and so on. In all these stories, be it Jacob or Joseph or Cain and Abel even, it's always the younger son who prevails. It's always the youngest son.
Yeah.
It's weird.
It is.
Because that's not really how those ancient cultures usually had their business done, right?
No, and I mean, this is also like, this is the mainstream like authority. You know, this book is like such a strong authority on like. Maybe this is part of the critique of that society. Maybe we could read that as like a critique. It's like they're at that time it was like slaves are fine, but we're going to challenge you on this age-based hierarchy. But also as well, like I think there's something like pretty, you know, this is like this maternal connection, like mothers and youngest sons, or I don't know if who is it? Yeah, is it Jacob when he marries? Oh, not Jacob. Who's the one we talked about earlier? Isaac. When Isaac fucks his wife, and then he's like, "Oh, I feel better about my mum dying now."
Yeah.
There's like that, and there's also Jacob being very close with Rebecca. There's that kind of thing as well, I think, which is quite a strong theme of this. It seems to be a fairly strong theme.
Weird,
sort of like
mother-son.
Yeah.
Dynamic. Well, I guess it's not uncommon for the youngest son to receive the most love.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so Isaac Janakte. Sorry, not Isaac. Jacob. He settles somewhere near Esau. And now there's this other guy called Hamar, and he has a son called Shechem.
Yeah.
And Shechem is like, I really like Dinah. Dinnerville. Whatever her name is.
Ring.
Dinah. And who's Dinah? She's the daughter of
Jacob.
One
of Jacob's many children.
many children. So Shechem is like, I'm gonna rape her.
Yeah.
And Jacob finds out.
Well, he rapes her and then he falls in love with her.
Yeah, right. And then he wants to marry her.
Yeah.
So Shechem's father, the rapist's father, goes to Jacob and is like, "Why won't you let me or children marry so we can share our land and you know, and so on?" And Jacob was like, "Oh, no." So then Jacob and his sons, they trick Hamor and Shechem, and they say, "Well, if you want to get married into our family, you all have to be circumcised."
Yeah.
This is so funny. So they
it's actually genius.
They trick them into cutting their dicks. Yeah. And then it says, like, after a couple of days, after circumcision, they're all weak.
They're all recovering.
They all
have painful penises.
Yeah, so Hamor and Shechem and all their people, their whole clan, they're all recovering from circumcision. And then Jacob's sons kill everyone.
So, well, it's Simeon and Levi specifically that kill all the Shechems.
They kill all the Shechems.
They kill all the men.
Yeah, they kill all the men, all of them. They take all their stuff, all of it, and then they drag the women and children away. Yeah,
sell them
as revenge.
Yeah. And Jacob's like, guys, what the hell? What?
And no one gets punished by God.
Oh yeah. No.
It's so weird. I don't know.
I don't know.
This is like the most horrific part in the whole.
This is the worst. Yeah, one of the worst. Like one of the worst parts. But I think actually I think maybe they get the just desserts at the end. When Joseph is on his deathbed, but this is chapter 50. It's the final chapter, but he describes he addresses each one of his sons, and he kind of summarizes who they are, and I think in a way that's a kind of blessing of you are this person, you are fucking wrathful, you are unstable, you are maybe when we get to that next episode, we should talk about that for sure, because I think it's quite interesting.
I think we should go until he gets sent away. Joseph gets sent away to Egypt.
Yes, no, I mean I was saying next episode.
Okay.
So that whole thing happens, the revenge against the Shechem.
Yeah, super. I mean, morality-wise, why is this even allowed? You know.
Yeah.
God, because they're the chosen people, they can just do whatever they want. I don't know. And they're like, oh well, but we couldn't. They did this terrible thing to our sister, so we had to get revenge.
I think there's probably something significant about their heritage here, because Simeon and Levi are Leah's children, and I mean all of the children of Leah and Rachel and the servants, they're all born under these these circumstances of jealousy.
And they're all kind of violent, right?
Yeah,
the Ishmaelites.
Yeah,
earlier. Yeah,
and I think there's probably some connection there, this idea that sin can run in the family, and sin can run through the circumstances of your own birth,
and also them punishing not just Shechem, but killing the whole clan. Is the assumption here is that sin and all that is hereditary, and it is North Korea basically.
Yeah.
It's complete group ideology. If one of you does anything bad, we have to kill all of them. Very kind of old thinking. I mean, I get this. I mean, some people still think like that, I guess, but
yeah.
Very primitive.
Yeah, and it's also premeditated as well, right? They scheme.
Yeah.
And they also use they use their culture as a means of getting to that point as well. The circumcision thing is quite significant. Which is a really, really bad thing to do. Leveraging your culture as a means of hurting other people, especially when it's used as a trick. It's got to be
Can you think of a modern example?
I don't know, but it's the idea is like there's a trust in like culture that like there's like a trust of like good faith, I guess. You know, which is often at conflict with like other ideals that we have. I mean, circumcision is a perfect example, I think, because like, you know, if you're a baby, you don't have any fucking say whether someone's cutting some piece of your dick off. You know,
True.
Like you don't have that autonomy when you're a child. But that is slightly different to what I'm talking about here. What I'm saying here is it's like you they're saying like we want you to participate in our culture, in our cultural activity by doing this thing, but we're actually using this as a means to kill you, to harm you. That wouldn't translate to circumcision generally. It's like using these traditions as a means of hurting people, which is like the really, really insidious thing, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know about a current example though. I don't have to think about that.
The only thing I could think of is perhaps like re-education camps, like for example in Canada, when they had the natives.
Right. Yeah.
What was it called?
Like the Catholic, like.
Yeah, they had like schools for the native people living there, but
sure. Well, they were like
basically concentration camps.
Essentially,
kind of, yeah.
They were like terribly run.
Yeah.
People they like awful conditions, but they were built on the guise of like
your
cultivating
culture.
like Christian values and shit.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a good point. That's a really good example actually, because you could argue that was intentional, like probably fairly strongly that like creating a poor environment, which will lead to the death of many people under the guise of it being part of like cultural enrichment or like engaging in culture, engaging in like this religious, like becoming close to this religion, learning about this religion. Yeah, for sure.
Okay. So, Jacob gets told by God to go back to Bethel and go back to Canaan. And he just kind of wanders around. And anyway, God finally officially is like, you are now called Israel, not Jacob.
Yeah, he says it again.
Yeah, he says it again. But they still keep referring to him as Jacob.
It's funny, when I was listening to my audio Bible.
Yeah.
And there was like, the version I was listening to this time had some commentary. And so every now and then there'd be like some questions or some comments about what was being said. And the first time that, when he wrestled with God and he was called Ishmael, the author was like, the person who was reading was like commenting on that. And then when it happened again, when it was like God returned and called him Ishmael, or called him Israel, it was like, the commentator was like, yeah, and he's come and he's said it again for emphasis. I was just like, yeah.
And then we're returning to the most old repeating story in this book. Jealousy between brothers. Cain and Abel, Esau and Jacob, and now we have Joseph and his brothers. So Joseph is the favorite son of Jacob.
Just before you get into that, we should say that Rachel and Isaac are now dead as well.
Right, okay.
So their chapter's finished. Now, we're at Joseph.
Yeah, so Joseph, son of Jacob, he's the favorite son.
Mm-hmm.
He's the only son, conceived by Rachel. And all the other brothers, the children of Leah, they're unhappy.
Yeah.
And so Jacob gives Joseph a really nice coat to symbolize how much he likes him.
So cute.
And this is so funny. I love this. Joseph has a dream that he tells his brothers about. And he's like, guys, listen to this. Listen to the dream I had. I had a dream where we were harvesting wheat, And, we're just in the field harvesting wheat. And your bushels of wheat, they all stand up and bow down to my bushel of wheat. Isn't that weird?
Fuck you, Joseph.
Yeah.
Fuck you, Joseph. I fucking hate you, Joseph. Fuck you.
You think we're gonna bow down to you? I'm gonna use that from now.
Fuck off, Joseph.
I'm gonna use that from now with the girls, when when we're at the bar and we're getting in the mood, there's some alcohol involved. I'm gonna tell her listen, girl, I had a dream where your bushel of wheat got on her knees and sucked my bushel of wheat.
So you're tell me more. No one's ever used that one on me before.
I'm gonna use that in negotiations.
I had a dream where I had a fucking what are they called? A hoe.
Yeah.
And I cut off your bushel of wheat. And I cooked it in a pan.
Listen, shareholders, everyone. I had a dream where your bushels of wheat traded all their shares to me at 0% interest to my bushel of wheat.
I had a dream my bushels of wheat went to the moon.
Such an obscure way to tell them fuck you.
Yeah.
And then he tops it off by being oh, and I also had a dream where the moon and the sun and the stars all bow down to me, so fuck you.
Yeah. So he tells that to Jacob, I think. He tells that dream to Jacob, and Jacob's shut up, bro. Shut up, little man.
But he's also what could it mean?
Yes, yeah. So, so his brothers hate him, and they scheme to kill him, and they're what are we gonna do? We're gonna kill this guy. I think they all go out together on a trip somewhere.
Yeah.
To do some shit, and they're plotting to throw him in a well. And they do that. They do throw him in a well, right? But
so they plan to kill him, and then Reuben, the oldest son, is don't kill him, throw him in the well.
Yeah.
And Reuben was gonna go back later to save him, to get Joseph out.
Right.
But then they see a caravan of Ishmaelites. Instead of throwing him in the well, let's just sell him to the Ishmaelites.
Yeah. So they sell their own brother.
They sell their own brother
into slavery.
And Reuben is not happy.
Yeah.
And obviously Joseph is not happy.
Yeah.
Then they take Joseph away to Egypt.
And they get his old coat, that Jacob gave him. They cover it in goat's blood and they show it to Jacob, and Jacob is convinced and he starts mourning. And Joseph, as a slave, is now sold to the cupbearer of the Egyptian pharaoh called Potiphar.
And I think we'll leave that for the next episode of Bible Boys.
Yeah.
The whole Egypt arc.
Yeah, so we've got to an important point now. This next part is really just about, really centers around Joseph and his relationship with his brothers and his relationship with God as well, the way that he is assisted. And yeah, I think it's very the kind of cooperation with God, or the influence with God, is much more apparent in this final section of the book that we'll talk about next time.
So to recap, we have the hierarchy going down from, we started obviously with Adam.
Yeah.
And then then Abel gets killed, we have Cain.
Yeah.
Blah blah blah, descendants. Everyone's bad. Then we had Noah. He's the only good guy. He gets the first covenant with God.
Mm-hmm.
Noah. Eventually, who's the next guy who's highlighted? Is that Abram?
I think Abram is the next proper boy. Yeah.
Abram, and then it goes down from Abram to Jacob to now we're at Joseph.
Oh, you're missing Isaac.
Sorry, yeah.
Abraham to Isaac,
Abram,
to Jacob
Isaac,
to Joseph.
Yeah. So there's always a favored people.
Yeah.
I guess, which later become the Israelites. From Jacob onward, right?
Yeah. And I think maybe this is one of the reasons that the nature comparison one of the ways that the nature comparison doesn't quite stand, like, because this idea of this there's a bloodline specifically,
Yeah.
and there's like this like sense of like purity. It's not decided what is pure, or rather, there's not like necessarily a logic behind like why is Rebecca and Isaac's relationship better than Isaac and Leah's relationship? Why is Rebecca's children, why are they more like pure or more, more respected by God than Leah's children? That's not explained by as like a random thing necessarily.
Yeah.
And again, if we think this is one very small snapshot of the world, it's like we could think of these people as assisted by God, chosen by God, but what about in some other random corner of the world?
Yeah.
Like what is stopping there from being an even more guided by God like line of people? Or
well, this explains two things. The first one is why you can't just become a Jew by converting, but you have to be born from a Jewish mother.
Yeah. Right.
That's the only way that Jews would accept other people. Like, there's very rare instances where people convert to Judaism.
Right.
They do the whole.
I don't know anything about the process.
They have to recite some Torah scripts to the the guy with the hat.
Yeah. It's literally on the tip of my tongue.
Yeah, I forgot the word, but usually you would be considered Jewish if you born from a Jewish mother. And there, we have this idea in Genesis definitely represented.
Yeah.
And the other related but not quote unquote pure lines, that would explain why there's always been antagonism between the Jewish people and other peoples. And obviously we have the very height of anti-Semitism in the 20th century. We don't have to go that horrible, but
yeah, for sure.
Even the Christians and the Jews and so on. There's always been antagonism,
and even within Jewish groups as well, right?
Yeah, because from what we can tell in Genesis, some of it is based on merit. Noah was chosen because he was a good guy.
Yes, yeah.
And Abram maybe was chosen and so on, but a lot of these later people, Jacob, Joseph, like Joseph is kind of a nice guy, but Jacob, for example, he's a complete asshole. And so it's not really clear why he's superior to any of these other people, right?
Yeah. I think Joseph's an interesting one because he's not really anything when we meet him. He doesn't have much agency when we first meet him. He doesn't really do anything.
Right. Like the first thing that he does is cheat his brother out of his birthright.
Oh no, I'm talking about Joseph. Sorry.
Oh, sorry, Joseph. Yeah.
The first time we meet Joseph is when he's having his dreams. I'm pretty sure. Like the first time we're properly aware of him as a character, apart from the time when he was born, and
But that's the point. He's born from Rachel, the pure Hebrew woman, right?
Yeah. But Joseph never really has any points where he's tested so much.
No.
Like
he wrestled with God. But
I'm talking about Joseph.
Am
I saying Jacob?
Yeah, I think so. The J-Man?
The same. I'm going to say Joe.
Joe Rogan?
Joe Rogan. Descendant of the chosen people. He's descendant of something. I think descendant from apes, maybe. Anyway, Joseph, again, I think this kind of we talked about this when we were talking about Dante, the idea of being touched by sin and what it means to be the idea of being touched by sin implies that to not be touched by sin is somehow more virtuous than being touched by sin and dealing with it correctly, or at least they're on the same level. It's I gave the example of the Japanese language classes, some teachers we have, they're everyone starts with 100%, but the more mistakes you make, the more marks you get taken off.
Yeah.
in the same way, it's like you can live your whole life completely sheltered from sin, completely distant from sin, never having seen it, never having experienced anything really bad, and you would be fine when you die, or your life would be judged as like as
in the Dante text.
In the Dante text, yeah. Let's say in the Dante text.
Because I think in Genesis, the idea, this is why we have the fall with Adam and Eve, is like, if you don't have, if you're not being tested, if there isn't any free autonomy, free choice, free will, there's no point in being judged in the first place, right? If they're in the Garden of Eden, they can't sin. They're unaware.
Yeah.
So that's why they have to become aware in order to be judged, right?
But that's the thing that I find confusing about Joseph's story, and it's kind of difficult. It's not really the best time to talk about it now. We haven't really looked into it, but I will say that Joseph is always assisted by God, and like he reaches this perfect position. Joseph becomes like the right-hand man of the Egyptian king, like through complete accident, essentially. He does suffer in prison for a couple of years, and he does like keep his faith in God, but he's never described as like having big decisions to make, or big moral quandaries, or big like
that's true
points of where his agency actually makes
everything just kind of falls into his lap.
Yeah, which is interesting. I think Dante, by comparison, obviously it's not as old. Dante's the message is so much clearer, like by comparison, I think, or at least like the way of like there's the logic of like the world in Dante feels so much more like clear to me than the logic of this book, and I think that's partly due to the fact that authorship. Who wrote this fucking book?
Yeah.
When was it written?
So many different authors and times, but yeah. Another interesting fact was when you read that one footnote that said Israel was first found as a name on some fucking tablet like 3,300 years ago.
Yeah.
So like I can't even imagine what there's so many clans and peoples and history there, which. Like my conception of history starts with the Romans, like who knows what was before,
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, well, Nick, as a closing note, I would say for next episode, I had this dream where your bushel of weed tugs on the balls of my bushel of weed.
I had the same dream.
Well, this is quite a quandary.
The next podcast will be a video. Patreon special.
Bushels of wheat. So, we're going to finish Genesis. One more episode, but probably not next one.
Yeah, probably not next one.
We might tackle Woman in the Dunes.
Yeah, it's
Suna no Onna by Japanese author Abe Kobo.
Yeah, and depending on whether or not our guest can come, the episode will either be in Japanese or in English.
It'll be in English.
Okay. Oh, it will be. Does he speak English?
Kind of.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, then we'll say it's going to be mainly in English. If this podcast is already hard enough to listen to, we apologize. But it'll be a fun one. I think it's. I've been really excited to read this book, and crossing the pond from like a lot of European existential literature into Japanese existential literature will be like very interesting, I think. And there's a very cool looking video like film adaptation of this book, which maybe we should also watch. I haven't seen it, but
I'm down.
Yeah, we could do that too.
My bushel of weed would like to watch this movie with your bushel of weed.
So yeah, if your bushel of wheat liked this podcast, and if your bushel of wheat perhaps wants to send an email, send it to bookboyspod@gmail.com. And yeah.
Amen.
Amen.
And a woman.
Boys.